My name is Arseny. I'm the moderator of this panel. I work at EPAM, and EPAM is like Uber for game development, which means that we're a very large service provider. And one of the kind of things I'm always thinking about is game mechanics. And as we work with clients to like put together games, you're always thinking, how to make this game better. The reason for this discussion is that game mechanics vary greatly between Asia and the US. And we're going to kind of dig into that and discuss maybe 4 areas. So let's start with Shannon. You guys introduce yourself real quick, and then I'll kind of give you the overview of the panel, and we'll start.
Hey guys, I'm Shannon Chang from Linekong. I'm head of publishing and partnerships. Linekong is a Chinese game developer and publisher. Originally started doing web games and client games around 9 years ago. And in the past 4 years, we've switched over to mobile. So a lot of our more successful titles are like Excalibur, Legend of Zoo, which is an IP-based game, 100,000 Bad Jokes. These are all top grossing games in China, grossing anywhere from 5 to 10 million US per month.
That's impressive.
It's all right.
My name is Teut Weidemann. I'm a freelance consultant specializing in the field free-to-play mechanics and free-to-play monetization. I do that since 8 years, and I'm doing games since 30 years. So if you have seen my keynote earlier on, you know who I am. So you can just Google me. So I represent here the Western world in terms of game mechanics and monetization.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Ronnie. I'm a director of operations from Gumi Asia. So I built the studio over the past 4 years, and also one of the titles that I've launched is Brave Frontier, and I take care of the operations and game ops in the company as well as all the games. Thank you.
We only have 30 minutes to talk about a very important topic, and I think the way we're going to do it is we're actually just going to drill in very deep, and we're going to talk about very specific things instead of kind of being global. And we kind of divided it into 4s. But I think this is important because half of the revenue, mobile revenue, comes from Asia. It's something like 47%. That's the statistic I have. And I live in the States, and I'm not exposed to any of these games, so I'm doing a lot of research. And one of the games I really like is Netmarble's game called Get Rich. Anyone from Netmarble here? Please find me so you can sign my butt or something, because I love this. I love that game. And I was very surprised when they ported it, I guess, to the West, and it's called Magical Dice. Very interesting what mechanics stayed and what mechanics were thrown out. So I think that was kind of the catalyst for this session is how these games are interpreted in different ways and what mechanics stay. But I think maybe we'll start a discussion about play style and demographics. So it's like, what is the conditioning of players in the East versus players in the West? Ronnie, why don't we start with you? What do you think about how players grow up? What do they play? And how do we use that in game design?
I see. So maybe I start a context. If you talk about role-playing games and stuff like that, it comes from a context that if they were to grow up from the 90s, also due to the exposure of console games and stuff like that, the role-playing games that they play, like maybe they play Final Fantasy or they play any other related RPG games. So if I come to my context, which I've operated role-playing games more, they would like to play games that actually have more explore and battle mechanics, and he likes a sense of more competition in the game, and they like to have engagement with their players, this type of games. And the style-wise, they like a bit more competitive and stuff like that.
Okay, so what is your interpretation?
I generalize a bit from the Western view, okay? In the West, we grew up with the games from the start, like the old Apple IIs, the arcade machines, and all the way like 30, 40 years ago, all up until now. And if we compare that to an audience in China, the audience, they didn't have console gaming at all. Console doesn't play any role, right? Even now. So they grew up and they were educated by MMORPGs in internet cafes. This is like the first, is that kind of what you agree upon? It's the first touch. The Chinese started with online gaming.
What age would you say?
That's a good question.
Like,
I don't know.
I was born playing.
Yeah,
in the womb.
we know that the demographics in China is very young, like 17 to 26, and very male-oriented. This is what we have at data. But we should not mix up China and Asia, because Asia is not, you know, there's the big blob China, which is like tons of revenue, but there are also Southeast Asia, which is a little bit different, and there's Japan, which is totally different. So you should kind of, you know, don't mix up these, because Japan actually grew up with console gaming only, and that changes their view on a lot of things compared to the Chinese, which grew up with online gaming. And like you said, you know, they like competition. So Chinese people love PvP. In the West, in the US, PvP is less than 40%. So this is a big gap which it's hard to fix, at least for us.
Cool. Maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, so going off of like the Chinese game mechanics, for Asia, there are multiple different markets that are unique in their own way, like Teut had said. And especially for China, I would say that people start playing from, you know, internet cafes. I would say that was late 90s, early 2000s, and it would be like 10 to 15-year-olds playing like Counter-Strike, as well as like World of Warcraft and League of Legends. And so there is a huge gaming culture, and now with free-to-play on mobile, it's so easily accessible. I would say China is one of the largest smartphone device consumers, and so there's an easy access to mobile gaming. So the market is only growing.
Okay, cool. So can we make a conclusion? If we were to come up with a conclusion about kind of the play style, perhaps can we say that, as an example, that, you know, Japan is very unique and it should be considered as a separate entity just because of the way that these guys are brought up, and, you know, tutorials or something should be designed around that. What do you guys say if there's a one-sentence conclusion about play style that we can come up with?
The only thing I can say is that if you want to make a game which addresses both China and the US, it's very tough. If you have the decision between PvP and PvE, and if you want to address both, you have to do both in the game. And if you just have one, you should focus on it and then find the right market. But as a Western, to go into China is very hard.
Well, even like the UI UX for the games are completely different. In China, you have buttons everywhere. Like, you need buttons and you need things popping up. That's half the game.
Then as for tutorial-wise, from my experience is that if you look at Japan or even the Western side, I would say in Japan, you will need a tutorial with a good story depth. So your tutorial can be longer, but your depth and content must be rich. Over to Western side, perhaps you may need to shorten it. That means you may go the other way.
Okay, cool.
There's some Japanese games who don't have any tutorial, and they're still really successful.
What game is successful that has no tutorial, and why?
Puzzle & Dragons has literally no tutorial.
And it's a match 3 game, so maybe because people know what match 3 is.
I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, let's move on, and you know, we were talking about PvE and PvP, and that kind of is this discussion on gameplay, and I want to talk about like monetization. So in my notes, I have written pay to win. So this is this big thing that you know, this phrase that nobody likes, but let's dig into it a little bit, and maybe we can split how this pay to win is interpreted, maybe in the West and the East. Shannon, do you have any thoughts? We'll start on this side.
Yeah, so Linekong is actually famous for ARPGs and MMOs. And so a lot of the monetization mechanics are built around gacha, collection of shields, armor, new weapons. And so we do have a very aggressive monetization strategy that's successful in China because a lot of players want the best shield, the best armor, the best sword. And so it really does feed into this pay-to-win mentality. Not only that, but also there's a utility aspect to it within the game, but also showing off the cool armor or whatever item you have to everyone else, whether it be through the game itself or sharing it on social media through WeChat or Weibo, other social networks.
So, what is gacha? Can you describe it?
Gacha basically means that you're pulling off random rewards about a system, and you have to collect a certain number of them to even make something better on top. So this is just roughly what gacha means. And luck plays a major role to actually get that, but I guess that's the next topic,
Yeah,
right?
next topic is luck.
In terms of pay to win, what we found out, or we were always surprised, and with we, I mean the Western market, is that in China, specifically, if someone goes in and grinds for the best sword in the game, right, he can be really proud, and he shows off that. Now there's this other guy in China who actually just pays $100 for the same sword. In the West, that guy who paid for it would be ripped apart. You know, you're a noob, you had to pay for this thing, you're that bad, you know, there's all lots of flames going around that guy. While I have the feeling that in China, if someone pays $100 for the sword, you know, people actually say, it's so cool that he actually spent $100 for this, you know, they kind of, it's not a negative feeling towards this guy, it's a positive feeling, right? The first thing is that he has the money to actually spend in this game. You know, it's like this kind of acceptance, yes, he has that money, and this other thing is that it's so cool that he actually paid for that. In the West, it's the opposite, and this might be a conflict in terms of when Chinese games try to make their games compatible with the Western audience, they at least have to not remove pay to win, but let's say sell it in a different way, because pay to win in the West is something where people are really allergic about. I guess this is my feeling when I compare the two gamers. There was a time when Chinese players played on the same servers than Europeans and Western people. And we had this conflict live in the audience, so we experienced how that worked. The game was called Ultima Online. I don't know if you remember that. And we had live the different play style just in front of our eyes. I mean, just 1 minute, wonderful example, right? PvP. So we were one of the best PvP guilds on the server. We didn't kill other players, we actually killed other player killers.
What was the name of the guild?
Huh?
What was the name of the guild?
MIM. We were the first to kill the sleeper in EverQuest, but okay, that's a different story. That's really hardcore. So then the Asians were coming, and we fought the Asians. So we were rushing in, like 15 people just rushing in and killing everyone. You know what the Asians did? They stood up in formation, you know, stood there and expected us to announce when we were going to attack. We were like, wait a second, what? Different playstyles right there, visible in UI, right? So Lineage took this to the extremes, but there you can see that the behavior in the game is different, meaning that your game has to be different in order to rely to this playstyle.
Okay, maybe if on this concept about like having a guild and doing a PvP in groups, maybe I cite my example of my recent game that I launched in Japan. I think Gumi Japan launched is Crystal Reunion. Their PvP style in terms of a group of players to another group is that they will actually have a whole group of players building their castles together in one crowd. And then when they want to attack, they may choose to teleport the whole crowd of people to the location of the enemy and then attack them in one crowd and then run away. This is another way of doing it. It's like hit, run, and take the loot. This is another way of doing it. And then if you want to revenge, you may choose to find the weakest person, you teleport your best guy, hit him, take his stuff, then still run away. This is a different way of doing it.
So, you know, we're talking about different play styles, and there's clearly a difference. On the prep call, Teut mentioned fair play, and I think that's the idea of, okay, well, I didn't work for my sword, I just bought it, and that's not cool in the West, but that's fine, you know, in Asia. And I wanted to just kind of dig in a little bit deeper on things like gacha and what they are and how they're interpreted, because gacha does work in the West. It just, you have to do it differently, right? And I was hoping maybe we'd spend a few minutes talking about that. So like, you know, how have we seen gacha work successfully in the West? Can someone give an example?
Clash Royale?
Summoner Wars?
Summoner Wars?
Brave Frontier.
So, and I think that one of the key things is that in the West, you have to explain why you're doing it. And then in Asian games, it's gotcha, just do it, you get the better thing if you keep going. Is that kind of the logic?
I have the feeling that gacha is a standard mechanic now the Asian players just accept as being there and they understand. In the West, if you put in gacha in a game, there has to be a reason why it's there in the world. Not for the player or the game or your monetization,
Yes.
but give it a reason and a context inside your world and you're fine. But there's another important thing is that there are players who play the gacha thing and they're unlucky. They just don't get the stuff they need. In Asia, I have the feeling that if someone gets the really cool stuff all the time, that this luck, this karma thing is something people like envy, like if you got all the cool stuff, we're like, you're so lucky, you're like this, you're shiny thing in the life, and it's part of their image of human beings. While bad luck in the West is something like, which really sucks. It's like, no. So if you have alternate paths to actually get that cool stuff in the game itself, not only gacha, buy, but kind of directly buy certain things or grind certain things, then you actually win the West audience as well, like Summoner Wars does, right? If you don't get the special rare monsters in their gacha system, you can actually work your ass off and actually get the cool monsters by working a lot. Which is kind of compatible with Asia as well, but not as extreme, I guess.
So what about VIP? I think in China, VIP is very, very popular. Why and what is it anyway? What is it? Ronnie, what is it? What is VIP system?
I see. I think in terms of VIP system, I would say China games have most of them. And then in terms of VIP system, you can say that it's a bit like pay to win, but the prestige of being a VIP, the benefits of being a VIP as you scale up the VIP ladder is very attractive. I've seen high VIP players, quote me if I'm wrong, but it's that I think they can play the game without paying anymore when they reach the high peak ladder of VIP. And then having their names ranked in the global leaderboard is actually pretty impressive in their country.
So it's kind of a pay to cheat.
I think cheat is a bad word, but I would say
it's a bad
to
word,
be prestigious.
I wish I could pay to cheat through life.
It adds to the stuff, like if in Asia someone buys an expensive stuff, the Asian players, say, hey, this is cool. And VIP is part of that system. And we're talking about VIP, which means that you're getting VIP when you pay a lot, you're climbing up the ladder. It's like miles and more just for that game, just for the Westerners here in the audience. VIP in the West doesn't work because it clearly shows you're paying. And if the other players are immediately realizing that you're paying, they call you cheater. Cheater, loser, whatever. So in the West, you should not show that you paid in the game, while in Asia, it's really cool that you do so. So this is a major breaking point, I guess.
Is there a good example, anyone, of VIP when it works in the West?
Game of War?
But it's just called VIP. It goes against what he's saying.
For me, Game of War is a really bad example because Game of War was just lucky to be the first strategy game in the App Store at that point. So for me, it's the exception to the rule. Actually, for me, Game of War is a really bad game.
I like it.
If I know that you spend like your marriage into this game, and you sold your car to actually buy stuff. When I enter a game and I have to click away 20 pop-ups who want to sell me stuff before I can actually play the game, for me it's a bad game.
Okay, anyway, let's stay on topic. But is there a VIP type system that I mean, we'll go on if no one can think of something that's but it's still the same VIP mechanic, but it's not quite the traditional VIP in the West. All right, we'll come back to it because the other thing I want to talk about is autoplay. Autoplay is very popular, and I finally played a game with autoplay, and I'm like, oh wow, this is awesome. I should just leave it going, and it was very fun. So, Shan, do you guys use autoplay?
Yeah, so we actually use autoplay in all of our RPGs and MMOs.
Can you explain why? What is the point of it?
Yeah, so actually for a lot of Chinese gamers, playing video games is their escape from reality. And so a lot of our players, like I've actually done customer service for our games as well, and just talking to the players and seeing what their life is like outside of the game. A lot of them might be restaurant servers or like hostesses, and the game provides them both leisure, entertainment, and escape from reality. And so once they're done working their 12-hour shift at a restaurant, the last thing they want to do is use their brain some more. So they play a game, there's autoplay, and it's like watching a movie. All of our games are AAA quality. It is literally like watching a battle scene, and it's just relaxing for them to like shut off their mind and just play.
Cool.
Right. Then from my side, maybe I can quote you how my Brave Frontier from non-autoplay and became autoplay. So it's really statistics driven also. Like I mentioned to my team always is, we develop the game with passion, but please operate with logic. So what happened is that we realized our playing sessions has been dropping. The frequency is shorter from our analytics. So we took a bold attempt to actually make the game autoplay in some of the battle modes. And once we enabled this auto battle, our playing frequency actually increased or doubled. And then this has been an interesting finding for us when we look at it from the analytics point of view. But if you come from player experience where we see the thing autoplay, it reminds us that, oh, I'm on a phone, I'm not on a console. So on a phone, if it's autoplay, and then I look at it in a casual view, actually I do feel good. That's on one point of the view. So coming back to what we see from the results, autoplay has, I would say, subtly become a good to have or even a must-have feature in most of our games. And I would say most of my subsequent games will have autoplay inside.
Even in the West?
Yes.
Nice.
In fact, that data that I got was from the West. That's why I know autoplay works.
Well, autoplay complements the mobile requirements, right? So if someone plays an engaging game like yours, and you have to grind certain things and a lot, and repeat certain battles over and over, repetitive and manual mode doesn't combine. But if I can actually auto-battle suddenly certain things to grind, I can actually play even during work.
Very cool.
Wherever,
Yeah.
and this is really cool. It adds, because I just did auto battle, I can continue working, and that adds to that. So the session length is immense because I can play for 8 hours straight, but I actually don't have the attention for 8 hours for the game itself. I can
Cool.
do certain things on the side.
And this is also really popular in slots games. Auto spin.
Exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that was the key. So before you mentioned luck, and I want to talk about luck. As I was playing Get Rich for the 20th hour, I realized that luck is probably interpreted differently because you're paying to have better luck. You're paying to have Get Rich is a Monopoly type game, right? So you're just spinning this dice, but you can pay to have the dice spin a way that's beneficial to you and detrimental to the opponent. So I want to talk about luck, and I think maybe it just interpreted a little bit differently around the world. And for me, that was kind of eye-opening. I'll start with Ronnie. What do you think about luck? Teut mentioned karma, and how in Asia it's like kind of a karma thing, where it's like, oh, you're lucky, that's great.
I see. I think in terms of luck, not really like a karma thing, but it's more like the feeling of whether you get it or don't get it. The peak of curiosity. Maybe I need to cite in two contexts. Like first is gacha. You say on Asian context is, oh, I'm taking an unknown. It piques my curiosity. I want to have it. This guy have it, I don't have it. Then when he has it, the feeling of achievement, the sense of me getting it is so great. I want to have that same feeling. So that becomes a motivation. And then in another context, it's not gacha. You are fighting this boss, and this boss has a drop. You know he doesn't always drop, and you hope that it drops. And that hope is so dear to you that you want to relieve the hope. So that's why in some of our mechanics, people keep grinding the same boss, wanting to get the same item, or they just can't get it, they keep doing it. Because that hope of getting this is so strong that it
Keep
grips
going.
them and bring them to keep doing it.
So it's a motivator. That's cool.
Yeah.
And to pay to increase that motivator.
I was going to say, and then you can
it's
get
okay.
VIP, and then
You can do that. Increase the drop chance of epic items is something which you can even subscribe to in some of the games. Like some of the get VIP status for 4 weeks and pay whatever, and your drop chance of epics will be 5% larger. You get more mana, more gold, more whatever.
in EverQuest, I actually probably would have paid even back then if we could have done that.
I would have paid a lot in World of Warcraft to get these damned swords of whatever they were called.
But in the West, it's still not a big practice because I think luck is interpreted a bit differently.
I haven't seen a Western game designed where you can actually change the luck rolls.
Well, so do you have a stance that you can talk about with how luck is interpreted in the West?
It's hard because the thing is that some players are really unlucky and some players are lucky, and then there's this jealousy going on and this community wars about that. I'm flamed all the time in Summoner Wars because I have 15 of these super rare monsters. 15. Some of them play this game for 2 years and have none. So they are always flaming me. And this is like, gives me a bad feeling, and I'm just telling them, listen, it's not my fault. And then they actually blame the operator of the game because they blame them to tune the numbers that they're unlucky. And suddenly you have negative feelings, and some of these people do something called rage quit, meaning that they're so mad at the game they quit playing it. Yeah, you know that, right? So it's actually, you should kind of make sure that if luck is in the game, you should kind of tune it that everybody has equal luck, which is really a Western stance on things, right? Handle everyone equal.
Luck cannot be bought, I think. That's the approach, maybe. So like my scholarly definition here is that in Asia, luck is in Asia, luck is something that can be influenced, and in the West, luck is just an influencer. Maybe, I don't know, does that make sense? I don't know. But I think an area that we didn't talk about is slot machines. So half the Western App Store is just slot machines, or around half. And the thing is, that is luck, or you think it's luck, but it probably isn't luck. And that's not something that you can pay to influence. You can just pay to get a result off it, right? And in the West, we don't see, like you were saying, a lot of that, influencing your chances of having a success. And I think that's really important. You have anything to add about it?
Yeah, so
before we
since you
move
did
on?
mention slot machines, one of my developer friends in Austin actually is working on a slots game that has some RPG mechanics to it. So essentially, a lot of like gamblers will have a good luck charm, and so they've built in a charm mechanic into the game that does influence the payout for the slots. So it's a really interesting concept. I actually helped them with some A/B testing on that. And it's interesting because it actually throws off the balance of the game completely. So most slots are designed to pay out 96 out of 100. So user puts in $100, the max they'll get out is around, on average, they'll get around $96 back. And so by throwing in these charms that have buffs and debuffs, it really throws off the balance of these slot machines. And there's a lot of math behind it. And so it's a really interesting concept. Maybe it shouldn't affect the payout. Maybe it should just affect the experience points that you get. But there is some experimentation going on around that.
We'll see how it goes. All right, so I'm not even sure if we're out of time, but I'll assume that we're not. And let's talk about the last topic is kind of about customization, personalization. So we were talking about this before, and I really love this Tsum Tsum, Disney's game, which apparently now has Star Wars, so I'm going back to play. And I can't understand how it makes money. And one of the ideas is that because the game is all about this kind of IP, it's all about personalizing the game. So what do you guys think about personalization? Are vanity items something that monetize? I'll start this side.
I think in terms of personalization is a mindset of the player that he wants to have a representation of himself in the game, that he may not be that person in real life. And also maybe, like a game, for example, maybe if you have played 7 Nights, you can actually change the look of your character. Of course, you need to buy that costume, but actually, if it looks cool, it looks really nice, you really want to have it. So that's become another motivation point.
Cool.
And then in terms of the personification, actually, they wanted to bring up the flavor of the character, more about representation of yourself. Maybe some people want to be a bad guy in real life, but they couldn't, so they want to personify a bad guy in the game. So that kind of feeling is actually quite nice for them.
Okay.
Well, in the West, from the data I have, is that vanity items or customization is kind of less than 60%, 6% of the revenue. So when you have all the monetization systems in, just 6%, and it's a lot of work to actually do that. And the reason is that in mobile, it's vanity is very incompatible with the way we play the game, because vanity only works when other people see you. And when other people see you by coincidence, not by visiting your island and seeing your hero or by clicking on you, but you're just standing somewhere and there's some cool-looking guy or a woman walking by and you say, oh geez, this shield I want to have as well. Then vanity suddenly works. But just by coincidence, I think it's tough at the moment on mobile.
Cool. You have any final thoughts on vanity? Because what you described happens to me all the time. I'm always like, oh damn, look at that. In real life, I mean. You have the same? Okay. All right, so I think we're going to finish up, and the last thing is I wanted to ask you guys if you had any examples of titles that successfully made that localization, whether it's from the West to Asia or from Asia to West. If you had any examples. Because I think, well, don't say the obvious one.
Well, I already said Summoner Wars did.
Yeah.
Summoner Wars is a game which is very Korean. It's developed in Korea for Korea, and they partnered up with an American company, and they put in the, let's say, US influence. So it actually addresses both Asians and Americans alike, and it's very successful in both territories. It's the only one I actually can think of, besides the obvious ones.
Well, another one that is, okay, besides the obvious ones, I think Seven Knights did quite well for localization, where they bring the game over to West, even it's a Korean game, but the way they localize, the English that they use, how the game is presented, I think is still quite well liked by the Western market. And then in terms of maybe just some info to share, if you look at RPG games, like most of my RPG games, we have demographics like around 18 to 24 at 40% and 25 to 34 at another 30%. So most of them are on the male demographics. So looking at that, if I look at Seven Knights, I would guess that they should be on a similar demographic with a similar audience.
Cool.
In terms of RPG, you know, just to add to that, we know that in the West, specifically in the US, RPG players, they have a bigger female share, like 30–35% in RPGs, plus they're like 5 years older on average than the Asian RPG players.
So Linekong is still in the process of localizing some games for the Western markets. But previously, one of our first hit games in China was Excalibur, and it did very well in certain Western markets. So for example, for Portuguese version in Brazil, it did very well. Also a 2D side-scroll RPG.
Cool. All right, guys. So if you guys have any questions, I can't see anyone in the audience, so Jaime will find you. But I just wanted to add that we use the word Asian and Western a lot, and we're just generalizing markets. We're not, being racist. Just FYI for the future, for the future. And I'm looking at the camera.
I just wanted to ask real quick, what's the latest on regulation and gacha in any of the regions that we're talking about? I understand there was quite a little bit of a problem with Grand Blue Saga, I think, in Japan. Is that going to be a potential issue for gacha mechanics?
The only country I know which has regulated that thing is Japan. In Europe, there's nothing. But as soon as some of these gacha games are so successful that regulations are coming in, I guess they will be really harsh. In Europe is a special case compared to the US because gambling in Europe is highly regulated, while in the US it's kind of on the loose. So you won't find any slot games in the top 10 in Europe, while in the US, there is kind of full of it. So there's a difference. But of course, US is like nearly twice the size in Europe, is it? It's 50-50 if you don't count Asia. With Asia, Europe is like the third.
Yeah, it's like 25%.
Yeah. So there's no regulation yet. And there's only one thing they regulated in Japan, which I don't know the detail though. I don't know if you know the detail. What they regulated in Japan about gacha?
Well, I think quoting the recent one that I've seen is that if let's say you have a game that's more on gacha in Japan, you may need to declare and differentiate your virtual currency in terms of free and paid. This is actually accountable to the government in terms of the accounting as well as during the refund process. There's a difference between free and paid gacha, and free and paid refund. And then you need to state the, I would say, agreement to the player that you need to input in your age when you play the game.
About the autoplay system, I want to ask about how that the autoplay just seem out to cut out of some of the interaction loop from the player when they got to a certain point and they want to glide, so they turn on autoplay. And is it that so much different from the idle games?
Is autoplay different from idle games? Yeah, you people know what idle games mean?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough genre. Is there any idle game in the top 20 anyway? No.
Maybe they're making one.
Idle games, biggie games where you don't do a lot, but you know they biggie just.
Clicker games are essentially idle games, right?
They're biggie idle games. Yeah.
They're in the top free.
There was this game with an alarm clock basically as well, which plays for itself, but.
So the question was, how is autoplay different in clickers or in idle games?
I think the difference here is that
Good
autoplay
question.
catches in once you mastered a certain stage in the game. So I mastered this boss, so the game knows I know how to beat him, so why should I actually prove to the game that I beat him again? I just can kind of autoplay. Some of the games actually sell this, so there's like these autoplay tickets. So you can kind of autoplay it for 50 times, but after that you either have to earn tickets or buy tickets for that. And some of the games let you play forever the autoplay. So I don't know what you prefer.
But so the idle games have, at least in the West, they kind of have a built-in autoplay, and you unlock it over time instead of a ticket system. But if we had a ticket system, then that's easier to monetize. Do you think that would be successful in the West? Do you guys think?
The only game with a ticket system I know is Heroes Charge. I don't know any other one.
Okay, yeah.
Do you monetize your autoplay?
Actually, for my side, I don't really monetize the autoplay because from my side, I deem autoplay as a kind of user experience. Like what makes my player feels less stressed when they play the game? What makes them feel less repetitive? So that's where I put in the autoplay. Then if I look at idle and autoplay, my own definition is autoplay games have some sort of interaction. You still need to play the game, but you don't play the boring stuff over and over again. Whilst idle, I think you're pretty hands-off. Yeah, this is how I define it.
Cool.
So autoplay becomes like a service to the customer,
Yeah.
more or less? Yeah.
Maybe something that you look forward to unlocking.
Hey, I have a quick question in terms of genre versus a Western country, the Western market versus Asia. I think for Asia, in particular, for Japan, Korea, Taiwan, those key markets, there's a trend for concentration on RPG games. And then for Western market, I think RPG games still a smaller, much smaller percentage in terms of consumer spend. I would like to understand your thoughts on what's the trend going on for this space. Is the US or Europe market gonna have more convergence towards Asian in terms of RPG? And also in terms of Asia market, is that just gonna be RPG growing as, you know, because I guess in terms of an audience for RPG games, that would be only a limited kind of number of players, and then the growth would potentially kind of get slower. So what's your thoughts on this kind of genre concentration phenomenon in Asia?
So I think for the recording, the question was just about trends, genre trends across the two markets that we're talking about, and then maybe growth. So my quick answer would be that Asia's always kind of jumping up and down. It's always very floating with the genres, with RPG kind of always, like action RPG kind of being the steady trend maybe. While in the West, it's like, you know, it's more like silos. It's like here's the Game of War clones, here's the slot machines, and then you got small games here and there. That's kind of how I see it, and I don't see that trend really changing in the West in the next 5 years. I don't know.
You know how much money worth that answer would be? If I can predict the future of the App Store for the next 2 years in either China or the US, that's worth millions. So to expect a free answer is really tough.
Free answer.
Yes, there are trends. They're really hard to research. It's really hard to get the right data. You have to understand all three markets. And if you dig deep enough, once you see a trend happening, you know that there are 1,000 developers already working on it. That's a tough thing in the App Store. So in order to react to trends, you have to be really, really fast. Most people are not that fast because they need time to actually see the trend. So my recommendation is that when you see a trend, go anti-trend. So there were trends 2 years ago which were really high-flying, and the first one won all the money, the second a little bit, the third nearly nothing, and all the 1,000 clones after that won zero. And then everybody didn't touch that genre anymore because they actually burned their hands. And then they forgot about that trend. And the trend happened like 2 years ago, rekindled that trend. Because now it's gone, but the players who loved that game are still there. So go there, trends 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
So we should make HTML5 racing games?
No, we are talking about mobile, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll have to wrap it up here. Lunch is waiting outside. Next session is scheduled at 1 p.m. Wait for the announcement. Thank you very much, and see you guys later.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.